This is The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. Each episode, we sit down with colleagues, leaders, and changemakers to share stories and lessons from the field of community and economic development. Together, we explore how communications shapes strategy, builds trust, and drives momentum, because every project, every partnership, every breakthrough begins the same way, with a conversation.
Welcome to the Comms Exchange, where we explore the people and ideas shaping how we build, connect, and communicate. I'm Christianne Brunini.
And I'm Rachel Ledet. Today's guest may be the only person we know who can talk LIHTC compliance, HUD recertifications, domestic violence advocacy, and entrepreneurship, and then walk straight onto a pageant stage without changing outfits.
Which is honestly a skill set.
It really is. Our guest is Jenna Ghisolfo, founder and president of Housing Consultants of America. Her firm helps affordable housing owners, managers, developers, nonprofits, and housing agencies navigate the compliance work that keeps housing available and residents staying stably housed.
But Jenna's story does not start in a compliance manual. She was once a Section 8 resident herself. She is a domestic violence survivor. She built a national consulting firm in one of the most complex corners of the industry. And as Mrs. Arizona of 2026, she uses her platform to talk about safe housing, second chances, and what stability makes possible.
So today, we're going to talk about the work behind the work, the rules, the files, the trainings, the resident conversations, public perception, and the very human stakes behind all of it. Jenna, welcome to the Comms Exchange.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. We're going to have some great conversations today.
Yes, and we got to meet you in San Diego earlier this summer, and we've been wanting to be able to do this with you since then. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time today.
Of course, it'll be fun.
So I have to start with the thing that I can't stop thinking about. You went from actually needing affordable housing to building a company that services people who are the providers that do this type of work. When did you first realize that your personal experience was going to actually become your professional purpose? And, where were you in the business sense of being able to even want to build something like this?
That's a great question. Honestly, I had no intention, I think like most of us, of ever going into affordable housing. We all grow up and we want to be doctors, astronauts, teachers, whatever it might be. I was the same case. I actually wanted to be a figure skater and travel with Disney on Ice. And I know, right? You can kind of see where that ties into pageantry later on, but that was my goal. And, life had a different path for me. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But when I really realized I was then living in Section 8, I had no intention of ever making this a business. What I knew, though, is that I wanted to be the person that was making an impact in someone else's life. And seeing how the caseworkers helped me out and got me back on my feet and really helped me reestablish my life, I knew I needed to do something where I gave back my time, gave back my energy. And so honestly, it was a few years later that I just fell into affordable housing, since there was an open position within the community that I was actually living at. Fell in love with the paperwork, which I know is crazy. Like, who says they love compliance paperwork? I will be the first one that tells you I love it. And I couldn't give it up. I just absorbed everything I could learn. And every day hearing different stories of people whose lives are being changed by a voucher, a unit, a set of keys, it motivated me more and more to want to stay in this industry. And then ultimately, it was 9 years ago that a mentor of mine kind of had one of those heart-to-heart conversations that we all need to have, and basically told me, you're too good for what you're doing. It's time for you to go on your own and expand your reach. I did it by myself for the first 2 to 3 years, thinking I was doing wonderfully. And all of a sudden, the business just blew up and I was having more contracts than I could have ever imagined. And now we've got over 88 team members across the nation that are impacting lives on a day-to-day basis, which is just, to me, blows my mind that this was not even in the cards when I was in high school. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like I said, I wanted to be a figure skater. I have no clue where this came from. So yeah, that's a little bit how that brainchild came about.
Gosh, there's so many things that are running through my mind as you were telling this piece of the story. And number one, I just have to say this is an argument for Section 3, which is trying to ensure that that subsidized housing creates job opportunities for the residents. And so this is exactly why Section 3 exists, and you're just a perfect use case for that. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then the second is how wonderful to have had a mentor to help you, develop your entrepreneurial spirit, because that sort of, it's not a hand up, it's an open door, which is incredible.
Yes. And it's nice to know that you've got mentors that support you, and we need them personally and professionally, but to have one professionally that to come to me and say, I see greatness in you. Let's do something about it. Let me see you put your talents to good use. And I still tell her to this day, she's one of my guardian angels, because without her, this business would have never come about.
Just think how we could all flourish if we had just one person say, wow, you have some really unique talents. But you have seen the Section 8 program from 3 completely unique vantage points, right? So you've been a resident, you used a voucher to start over, then you were a fraud investigator inside of a housing authority, and now you're a consultant advising the whole system. So how does that sort of vantage point of seeing all 3 sides change what you believe about how this work should be done?
Yeah. So, the first perspective of being a Section 8 voucher recipient, I was a domestic violence victim. And one of my ways out was having that Section 8 voucher in my hand. So I looked at it as a lifeline. It gave me a second chance at life. So seeing it from the resident perspective allows me to have, I think, more empathy for our clients in whatever their circumstances might be. Then coming from the fraud investigator side, though, I gotta tell you, it's hard because you have a heart for these families, but then to find out that they're committing fraud against a federal program, you almost become disheartened then. And then now coming from a ownership perspective and leadership role, it's seeing the overall picture, the movement, the progress. So I can tell you, it allows me to have more empathy for our residents, as well as encouragement for the staff that's sitting behind those desks doing that job on a day-to-day basis, because it is not easy. It's not. Yeah.
No question about that.
A lot of our listeners work around affordable housing, but not inside the compliance function. They might be developers, architects, contractors, association leaders. What do you wish that the rest of us understood about the responsibility of getting this part of housing right?
That I would tell especially any new owner, investor, compliance is essential to the success of your property. And I think a lot of, especially new owners, think that they can just push it off to the wayside, that it's not an important aspect or piece of the puzzle for their project, when in reality, it can cripple them if not done properly. And so I always advise clients, be proactive, be ahead of the game when it comes to compliance. There is a lot of paperwork. It is tedious. We know it. Unfortunately, HUD is not known for light loads of paperwork. So, it's one of those things that you've got to be prepared for, but make sure you've also accounted for compliance, because I see too many new owners or developers going into projects and just saying, we don't need compliance. We'll figure it out on our own. We'll do it on our own. Then they're getting into trouble and they're having to do double the amount of work that could have just been done properly the first time.
For sure. So that's from the practitioner lens, right? So how they see it. There's other people who are not in the housing world that have misconceptions about what what this program really does for them, and for people who are bouncing from place to place or not able to stabilize in a single unit, or maybe they're homeless 1 month in a car, but they have a unit for a month. What can you tell us from the inside what this actually does for you when you have this voucher opportunity?
Yeah. So anybody who is, as we like to call it, living on the streets, living in their cars, temporary housing that they're finding, having a voucher is stability. It's having a permanent roof over your head. Section 8 and these vouchers are offered in every state across the nation. There's not one that is missing. And it allows the person to move into an apartment or a home, technically, and only have to pay a portion of their income towards rent. So it's a lot more affordable for families who are struggling. And to be quite honest, let's say your income is zero because you're making nothing, you're living on the streets, you've got no job, your rent is zero. The government subsidizes the remainder of your rent directly to then the ownership or the management company, whatever it might be. So a voucher really does provide a second chance, a stable roof over somebody's head. And this is a sad statistic, but unfortunately, we don't have as many women's shelters and family shelters as we really should versus men's shelters. There are more men's shelters across the United States than there are for women and children. And so when you think about that, we see a lot of families that are on the streets that would be praying for a voucher just to give them a second chance.
Certainly, there is a lot of heart in your work, and it comes from experience and it comes from the empathy that you mentioned. My question is going to be about building a national firm that is so niche, that is technical, that is high stakes, that I'm assuming is kind of tough to hire for because it's so specific. What have you learned about leadership, confidence, letting things grow when you decided that you were going to scale Housing Consultants of America, and maybe some of the leadership thoughts that you had in that process?
Yeah. So one of the biggest reminders, and I still have to remind myself of this to this day, is I was an owner and as an entrepreneur, I don't have to be a specialist in every department or in every area. I don't have to be knowledgeable in HR or IT or accounting. I need to hire the right people to support me that are experts in those fields, because then that takes away from my stress and I can focus in on things that are more important to me, like outreach, advocacy, continuing to bring in new business. So for me, it's important to surround myself with people that are smarter than me in other areas to support and help build my vision. Of course, I always believe in training when possible. There's great college students or anybody who's new that wants to learn the industry, but I've learned that I don't have to be an expert in every field. I can hire help and then train up some good help so they learn good habits as well.
It's an important distinction, and one that we talk about at 3090 a lot, in fact, because sometimes if you are able to give the work that you don't love to somebody who loves it, then it really it gives everybody more opportunity.
Correct.
It really just creates a better culture altogether because everybody is leaning into their specific skill set. So
Yes.
but you talked a little bit about training, and you're clearly a polished communicator. You speak, you MC, you compete, you train, you do all these things. In fact, I had the opportunity working for a previous employer to sit in on one of your etiquette trainings. So that was
Yes.
neat. Yeah. But you've even turned that into a side venture where you are teaching etiquette and presence to the next generation, not necessarily in a corporate setting, but to the next generation.
Yes.
So, what has all of that taught you about presence that shows up in a boardroom, a training room, or in a difficult resident conversation?
It really is all about your presence. Teaching and business coaching from etiquette to just day-to-day conversations. It's all about making that connection with a group, an individual, a resident. And you have to be aware of your surroundings and the situation to know, do I need to be upbeat and bubbly in this time? Do I need to be more serious? Do I need to have more empathy? And as a good leader, you know what you are walking into and how to put and wear a different hat for each situation to better support the individual that's sitting across from you. I can tell you the leadership and the etiquette training that we had for me is just so much fun to teach because it's not being taught in high schools anymore. And a lot of even parents aren't teaching some of the basic etiquette that our children and the next generation need. So if I have the opportunity to educate someone, even if it's as simple as here's how you properly present a business card to someone, or how to follow up properly in an email once you've made a first connection, a lead, whatever it might be, I can change their business habits and help develop them into a successful entrepreneur, individual, employee, even maybe future CEO. So giving them some of the basic tools that might have been missing in elementary school and high school allows them to feel empowered and a more well-rounded employee.
So that goes a little bit into what we think about building culture and empowering people to be their best selves so that they can lean into their organization's culture. And there's a lot of authenticity in knowing yourself and knowing what you're part of. So I'd like to ask about maybe some vantage points that you've had when you go into an organization that is doing affordable housing well. Is there something specific that you might notice about their culture that is special and maybe that is lacking in other organizations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You when you walk into an organization, you can tell within minutes if they've got a good culture. The example I always use is Chick-fil-A, even though it has nothing to do with housing. We all know Chick-fil-A has a great culture of being very warm, friendly, and bubbly the minute you walk up to that counter, right, to place your order. What type of perception and culture do you want to be reflected from your business? I can tell you two of the biggest companies that I loved working for. The first one, their culture was so family and employee centric that it made you feel like you weren't working. Going to work was fun. It was enjoyable. It wasn't a job. You looked forward to going in and seeing your coworkers and your colleagues each day. And they made that by having an open door policy, by doing some creative activities with families, even if it's just picnics with, significant others or families, little things to show that the company is not only investing in the employees, but is also investing in their families because families are the reason why they're able to do their jobs. The other company that I worked for that had one of the best CEOs I've ever had, I will never forget, would every day, without a doubt, before started any of his meetings, would walk the floor and check in on every single team member. Now, it wouldn't be a 30-minute conversation that he would have with us, but it'd be a little, how's your kid doing? Do you need a cup of coffee? What's your schedule look like today? Do you need any support from me? Just having that even 2-second connection or 2-minute connection with the CEO made me feel heard, valued, and appreciated. And so that is something that I tell CEOs now is you don't have to be involved in everybody's business. You don't have to be in every department, but you absolutely should know the name of every employee or at least be able to associate something with them to build that one-on-one connection to develop respect and rapport from them.
And this isn't the next question, but it did remind me. I just saw that you launched a new leadership cohort.
Did.
So I think that this is a good moment to actually call that out. So congratulations on that. I know
Thank you.
that there are plenty of leaders out there that will benefit from that. But
Absolutely.
in addition to that, there's the presence that we bring into the room, and there's the presence that affordable housing is bringing. And what do you think about the public narrative around public housing and affordable housing that most people get wrong?
Of course, the biggest misconception we see in affordable housing is NIMBYism, not in my backyard, right? We see affordable housing being built and city officials, residents, neighborhoods, they don't want it in their communities because and the misconception is simply because it's going to bring property values down. When in reality, that is not the case. What it does is it helps sustain and build that community, that city, whatever it might be. And so I think a lot of times when affordable housing developers are going into properties, land, things like that, they need to come at it from a different advantage of how can we make this property not only benefit the residents, but the outside community as well. So that way it becomes a cohesive unit. And we are seeing so many developers get very creative with the way they incorporate affordable housing into communities to really ensure the communities are accepting of the properties. Everything from saying we're going to build a community park as a result of this, right? We're going to build the apartment complex, but we're going to build a community park and it's going to be open to all, not just the residents. I've seen developers say, we're going to let the community come paint the inside of the walls to have some artwork and do wall murals and feel like they're a part of this, or even having elementary schools do hand art that becomes, a decorative wall. Involving the community in that process helps prevent NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And that's really where we're seeing a lot of the pushback, is because there is that misconception that it's going to bring down property values or destroy your community. And that's just simply not the case.
I would really like to talk about your platforms. And as Mrs. Arizona and through your organization, Still Standing in Heels, we would love to know about your survival story being part of your messaging and your public work. A lot of experts and business leaders are a little cautious about sharing their personal story and how that interweaves with their personal brand. How have you decided what to share, and maybe give us just a little introduction into the platforms that you're so passionate about?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was at a young age a domestic violence victim where I was in a relationship where I was being abused, and the only way out for me was to leave literally in the middle of the night with nothing but a trash bag of my belongings, an infant on my hip, and thankfully that Section 8 voucher in my hand. And that Section 8 voucher gave me the second opportunity and second chance to really rebuild my life. I've then taken that even further. And like you mentioned, it's not something a lot of domestic violence victims like to talk about, but I knew that it was a part of my story as I grew as an individual, as a mother, as an entrepreneur. And it's what led me to Section 8. It's a part of my story. And so originally, when I launched the company and I would teach classes, we always have a little segment that goes over your why. Why do you do what you do every day? Well, my why is obviously because I needed the Section 8 housing. So I started to kind of share my story a little bit in the business. It wasn't honestly until I went into pageantry that I was being interviewed constantly and I realized that really is more part of my story. And I'm such an advocate for domestic violence victims finding resources and getting out of these situations that I knew more of my story needed to come out. So as part of the pageant, we have to do, it's optional, but of course, we optional is never really optional, is it? No, we know that one. And so I got up on stage in front of thousands of people and it was a poem that I wrote about being a domestic violence victim and getting out of the situation. And I didn't realize how impactful that one poem was going to be until I got off stage and had, I want to say, 20 women that were just competing with me. Mind you, I hadn't even gone out into the audience yet, that all came up to me and said, we have similar situations. Thank you for sharing your story. It was a bonding moment. And once that started, that ball got rolling, I knew I needed to continue telling my story. And so that's when I wrote the book, Still Standing in Heels. which goes into full detail of from start to finish, where I could tell I was starting to be in a domestic violence relationship but didn't know how to get out. These were all the steps I took. And then ultimately what led me to open the company, have my children, and now I'm remarried to an incredible CEO. So it really tells a full picture. And it also, as I'm sure you imagine, is very cleansing to get it all out and just to know that my story is out there for the world to hear, and you can respect it or you don't have to like it if you don't like it, but it's my personal testimony that's led me to where I am today.
Well, we know from that you know how to make big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, right? Because is there any bigger goal than I'm going to get out of this, right? I am going to, like, that is one of the biggest goals. So BHAG, for anyone who doesn't know, is part of the EOS system. It is setting something really large in front of you so you have everybody's working towards that same goal. So now that you have hit your first BHAG and then your second and your third and probably 30 at this point, what is your next chapter? What is your next big goal for your company that you're building towards now?
So with the company, there's two kind of goals we have. We want to, as you saw, we just recently launched the business coaching branch. So I really want to help support individuals that are in affordable housing, see what they're capable of, and help developing them as professionals. Because as we know, too many people get burnt out in this industry and we lose some good people. So I really want to work with individuals to make sure that they're not getting burnt out and they stay in our industry. So that is the business push. And then it's also to continue to expand into more states and add more team members. We're at 88 right now. My goal by the end of the year would be 100, because if I can have 100 team members, it really means we are making a greater impact in as many states as possible. So those are the two professional goals.
Those are amazing. And we believe that you'll get there probably sooner than you think. That's awesome that your team is growing and that you're not just seeing it as, bodies on the ship, but actually about penetration into markets that maybe you're not in currently. So
absolutely.
Well, we love that. And growth is always so exciting. So we're rooting for you. We are going to flip over into our rapid fire round, which is a fun part of our show. We just get to ask you some sort of silly questions to get to know you a little bit more. So the first question is, if compliance had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, geez. Compliance had a theme song, what would it be? I feel like it'd be like You're Doing Me Dirty. Like it just is. It's a lot of paper. They don't, they need a good theme song written about paperwork, don't they? Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we should come up with one. That would be
we should commission one.
Yes.
We'll call Justin Timberlake and ask him to write one for us.
Yep, right.
All right. Well, then let's try this one. Finish this sentence. Stable housing changes everything because
it provides, obviously stability, but it provides a second chance for a family. It's one of the essential needs that we all have. So it provides hope is the best way to put it. It provides hope.
What is one of your favorite things to teach anywhere on any of your platforms?
I love teaching etiquette. It's just so much fun. You don't have to talk about rules and regulations and codes and all that fun stuff. Business etiquette is just fun. Let's get up and have a real world conversation. Let's practice our posture, the way we're standing, the way we present ourselves. It's just fun.
Okay, so I have one more question. You shared right before we got on our live feed that you just got back from Sydney. And so yes. I want to know, what's the coolest thing that you did while you were there?
Oh my gosh. It was incredible. I would say the best thing we did there was a tour of the inside of the opera house and getting to see how it was built, hear actual performers on some of the stages rehearsing, and hear how the music just bounces off the walls. Do you know in the opera house, they don't use microphones? in any of the auditoriums because it's built so that the sound bounces off the walls and you can hear it perfectly no matter what seat you're in. So that blew me away.
That's amazing. I did
We
not
should
know
always-
that.
Right?
I know. Field trip.
Yeah, there you
Next
go.
field trip. Yeah, that feeds into nicely with our like architecture clients and acoustical studies. So maybe that's needs to be on all of our lists. Well, thank you.
You might just have to take a trip to Sydney just for that.
Know. Chris loves a trip, so we'll have to start mapping that one.
For sure.
Thank you so much, Jenna, for sharing with us the human side of the work that most people only understand as rules and files and deadlines and paperwork. We are so appreciative of your time and for your just sharing today.
Of course. It was great to be on. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us before we go how people can find you?
Yeah, so you can connect with our company at housingconsultantsofamerica.com or on LinkedIn, Facebook, social media. You can find us, or if you want to connect with me personally, Jenna Ghisolfo. I'm on all of the social media platforms. Feel free to connect with me.
Well, if today's conversation changed the way you think about pageants, compliance, or who affordable housing is really for, please like, share, and subscribe to the Comms Exchange. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on an exciting new episode. We'll be back soon with more stories and strategies from the field, because every breakthrough begins with a conversation.